Welcome to my garden, the GinGee GoodEarth show. It's already August. It's August 4th, Tuesday, 2020. GinGee GoodEarth show. Production Roman numeral 8, part 19. GinGee GoodEarth is your host and director. It's on the American Peoples. The scene is United States of America. Take love. We're going to do another reading on the book A Universal History of the United States of America. And I have a special program for you, which is the photo slideshow of my journeys with American history. Journeys and adventures at different museums, mainly New York City and Pittsuburgh, Carnegie Museum, and the Westmoreland Museum in Greensburg. West Virginia museums. And let me take out my look and see glasses. And here we have today the yucca plant, the Pittsuburgh Victorian Gibson girls. I see a wonderful St. Patrick's Church in New York City on the slideshow. And this is all about patriotism and being patriotic. I see a tea kettle that's shaped like a dragon that was made in Holland. And I have first American woman and a patriotic revolutionary soldier. There I am, but on baton twirling at the Andy Warhol Museum on Valentine's Day. Today we're going to feature the book, A Universal History of the United States of America. And I like to give an introduction of a quote that was written by Henry Ford. When everything seems to be going against you, remember, the airplane takes off against the wind, not with it. And I did read articles today on the Pittsuburgh International Airport. And at one time, if I recall correctly, there were 30 million flights through the year 2019. And they have around 8 million flights. That's still quite a bit. I'm going to have to read that article again. You can look it up, Pittsuburgh International Airport. But maybe it was 3 million, and I have to look it up. I shouldn't not even have mentioned it. But one thing was for sure, the amount of flights was greatly reduced since the pandemic. And 6,000 flights to me seems to be too many. But my programs are to educate, amuse, enrich, civility, and nice matters. My programs are fun-filled, and we need to adapt, advance, and achieve in a pandemic arena of terrific challenge. And we're still on the debate whether it was a bioweapon or we have been injected and not infected. But again, if you're infected, it's contagious and you spread the disease. But 2019 vaccines might have had the virus reflections in the vaccine. So that has to be researched. And if you watch the YouTube video, Age of Truth, with Judy Mikovits, who was a biologist and a virologist, who, since she was 25 years of age, and she's an expert on virology and biology, and she's on an interview. It's a two-part interview, part A and part B, and she gives a great overview with the host of Age of Truth video channel on YouTube. So I hope you enjoy that. Please watch it. And then again, watch all the videos too with You Are Free TV with Julie. And she's military and she does a wonderful job. Now I'm going to read another poem, The World. A bush overhanging a chain-link fence, made into a haven home, held together with knotted plant skin, wide wooden walls to scale, climbing beneath your palms, homes for termites and beetles, made from redwoods dead for 80 years, the old oak tree with tunnels dug around the roots, for little people made of twigs and grass to play in, twisted paths to explore, skirting forests and fairy mounds, winding through side yards and kitchen gardens by a pond with koi and sirens, resting in the cool boughs of the magnolia tree, while heat like hot molasses presses against my bones, bees drone. In the mammoth white blossoms, fragrant like my dead grandma's perfume, and great black ants skitter over my legs, fleeing egg-laying wasps, running through lawns gone wild, with grass as long as hay, trying to catch butterflies or maybe pixies, watching praying mantises stalking lunch, scratches and scrapes running my length, clad only in grubby clothes and dandelion crowns. I am happy in solitude. The book is titled, and it's at the Library of Congress, Poetry by L.B.J. And we're going to go right to the reading. And there's a storm brewing outside. And I might as well open the door so we could enjoy listening to the thunder. I moved up the picture show so you can watch the pictures.
Yesterday is gone, tomorrow never comes. Today is all we have. So savor every minute on this stage called life. And celebrate the day as we welcome the no
So Pittsburgh, we have a downpour of rain, and I will begin. At the beginning of the chapter, we just finished page 132, and we're beginning a new chapter, chapter 6, part 3rd, Universal History of the United States of America, a summary view of the causes that led to the American Revolution. Although the narrow and illiberal policy of the British government towards her North American colonies from their first settlement was calculated to alienate the affections of the colonies from the parent country, yet from their exposed situation and habitual loyalty, this unworthy conduct, long persevered in, produced no sensible impression on the Americans. Their loyalty and attachment to the interest of Britain were not in the smallest degree impaired. Down to the period of the Peace of Paris in 1763. Never had they shown so much zeal or during the pre-sacrifices in the cause of their country as during the preceding war, having lost more than 25,000 men, expended all the revenues they could raise, and involved themselves deeply in debt. Almost the whole burdens of the war in America had fallen on the colonies, and their exertions were altogether disproportionate to their means, and tended greatly to impoverish and distress them. After 8 years' arduous struggles, attended with the greatest sacrifices, the successful termination of the war, the dominion of France in America being relinquished forever, occasioned universal joy throughout the colonies. They forgot their suffering. It became universal. Universal history of the United States of America. The press, that great engine of truth and liberty, was called into requisition, just like the Epoch Times newspaper in America 2020. The press, that great engine of truth and liberty, was called into requisition. The subject was ably and elaborately discussed, and the more it was discussed and the better it was understood, the more strong and determined the opposition became. All the colonies petitioned and remonstrated against 3 obnoxious measures, and most of them appointed agents to present their memorials to Parliament or the King. But notwithstanding the opposition and excitement in America and the remonstrances of the colonies, Mr. Grenville, who was at the head of the Treasury, prepared the stamp bill and introduced it into Parliament in February 1765. And although opposed with all the powers of eloquence by Alderman Beckford, Mr. Jackson, Colonel Bear, Sir William Meredith, and others, it was adopted by a great majority, 50 only voting in opposition out of about 350 members who were present. It was adopted by the great majority, 50 only voting in opposition out of about 300 members who were present. On the second reading of the bill, various petitions not only from the colonies but from the London merchants interested in American trade were presented, but the petitions were not even received, being refused on the plea that no memorial could be received on a money bill. Having passed both Houses of Parliament on the 22nd of March, the Stamp Act received the royal assent. Dr. Franklin, then in England as an agent for Pennsylvania, wrote to Charles Thomson, afterwards Secretary of Congress, "The sun of liberty is set. You must light up the lamps of industry and economy." Mr. Thomson, in a spirited reply, observed that he thought other lights would be lighted up to resist these unconstitutional measures. It is unnecessary to add that this prediction was soon fulfilled. Let's put on the tape. This unjust and impolitic act was the first great cause which led to the American Revolution. Indeed, it was substantially the first scene in the bloody drama. It was substantially the first scene in the bloody drama of that revolution. The unjust and unimpoliticate act was the first great cause which led to the American Revolution. Indeed, it was substantially the first scene in the bloody drama of that revolution. It was passed in Parliament on the 7th of February, 1765, under the ministry of Lord Grenville, and was repealed on the 18th of March, 1766, from the influence of Mr. Pitt. This period of 13 months was the most eventful and tumultuous of any which had hitherto occurred. The apprehensions of the people were roused to the highest pitch, and the most determined spirit of the opposition prevailed throughout the colonies. The Americans had not believed the act would be passed, and on receiving the intelligence everyone was struck with astonishment and filled with consternation. They looked at each other with amazement, and for a short interval hesitated what course to pursue. But soon recovering from their consternation, they determined not to submit such a flagrant outrage on their rights. In Boston, the ships in the harbor, in token of the deepest mourning, suspended their colors half-mast high. The bells were rung muffled, and the obnoxious act, with the death's head in front of it, with the motto, "The folly of England and the ruin of America," was carried in solemn procession about the streets. The discontents soon spread through the colonies, and opposition became general and determined. The spirit of the people gave a tone to the colonial assemblies, and bold and decided resolutions were adopted against the iniquitous decide of parliamentary. I can't see. I don't, because it's storming outside, there's very little light. And my flashlights are dying out from all this work of reading and using them for 60 videos. So things are, I hope you heard that thunder. I have to start again. So I don't mean to do this. It's just an odd day. The Americans had not believed that the act would be passed, and on receiving the intelligence, everyone was struck with astonishment and filled with consternation. They looked at each other with amazement, and for a short interval hesitated what course to pursue. But soon recovering from their consternation, they determined not to submit to such a flagrant outrage on their rights. In Boston, the ships in the harbor, in token of the deepest mourning, suspended their colors, half-mast high. The bells were rung muffled, and the obnoxious act, with Death's head in front of it, with the motto, "The folly of England and the ruin of America," was carried in solemn procession about the streets. The discontents soon spread throughout the colonies, and the opposition became general and determined. The spirit of the people gave a tone to the colonial assemblies, and bold and decided resolutions were adopted against the iniquitous scheme of a parliamentary taxation. Virginia took the lead, and on the 28th of May, 1765, Patrick Henry introduced his celebrated resolutions into the House of Burgesses, which declared that the inhabitants of the colony were entitled and had possessed and enjoyed all the rights of liberties and privileges of the people of Great Britain, and the General Assembly of the colony had always exercised and alone possessed the power to levy taxes and imposts on the inhabitants of the colony, and that they were not bound to yield obedience to any law or ordinance whatsoever designed to impose any taxation whatsoever upon them, other than the law and ordinances of the General Assembly. So bold and unexpected were these resolutions that whilst they were reading, one of the members cried out, "Treason! Treason!" These resolutions were communicated to all the colonies, and the spirit they breathed spread from one legislator to another, and their sentiments were reiterated in resolutions adopted by their legislators and the freemen in public meetings. Committees were appointed by the assemblies of the colonies to correspond with each other and to meet the consultation, the object of which was to secure harmony of feeling and concert of action. These measures had very happy effect in the meantime. The press teemed with constant publications vindicating the rights of the colonies, and many of them were of highly inflammatory character, calculated to raise the public's mind to the highest pitch. The pulpit also, particularly in New England, labored in the same cause with great zeal and effect. The flame of liberty kindled from breast to breast and spread from province to province until the conflagration became general. The spirit of opposition ran so high as to break out into acts of tumult and disorder. In Boston, the effigy of Mr. Oliver, the stamp master, was burnt and his house assailed, partly demolished, and his furniture destroyed, and soon after the house of William Storer, deputy register of the Court of Admiralty, was attacked, the books and files of the court destroyed, and the house of Benjamin Hallowell, controller of the customs, shared the same fate. These outrages were followed by a more bold and daring attack upon the dwelling of Mr. Hutchinson, lieutenant governor of the province. He was obliged to flee to save his life, and his house was entirely demolished, except the walls, and everything in it destroyed or carried off. Similar outrages were committed in other places. In Connecticut, Mr. Ingersoll, the stamp officer, was burnt in effigy in many towns. Whilst he was proceeded from New Haven to Hartford, where the assembly was in session. He was pursued and overtaken by a large concourse of people, some from more than 30 miles, and compelled to resign his office, which was followed by 3 hearty cheers of liberty and property. This took place at Wethersfield, from whence the people, who were headed by the militia officers, proceeded to Hartford, where Mr. Ingersoll was compelled to read his resignation in the hearing of the assembly, which was succeeded by loud acclamations of liberty and property. In New York, the stamp officer was compelled to resign, and Lieutenant Governor Colden was burnt in effigy, with a stamp bill in his hand, suspended from his own coach. The whole was consumed togetherness. In the southern colonies, the public feeling did not lead to the same excesses, but in all of them means were found to compel the stamp officers to resign. In all the colonies, the assemblies adopted resolutions in opposition to the Stamp Act, although in many of them the rural governors prorogued and attempted to stop their proceedings. The members of the colonial assemblies were animated and encouraged by the people, who in most of the towns instructed them to oppose the Stamp Act. But the most important measure to unite the colonies and give energy and effect to their opposition was convention on a Continental Congress, consisting of deputies appointed by each colony. This measure was first proposed by the Assembly of Massachusetts. The meeting was appointed to be holden in New York in October 1765. All the colonies except New Hampshire, Virginia, North Carolina, and Georgia sent deputies. The 3 last of these colonies were prevented by their governors, and the first excused itself on account of its peculiar situation. The Congress, after mature deliberation, adopted a Declaration of Rights and a statement of the grievances of the colonies, and asserted in the strongest terms their exemption from all taxes not imposed by their own representatives. It also prepared a petition to the House of Commons. As 1st of November, the time when the Stamp Act was to go into operation, approached, public feeling became still stronger and was excited to the utmost to prevent the execution of the law. In New York, 10 boxes of stamps, which had arrived there for Connecticut, were seized by the populace and burned. In other ports, the masters of vessels which brought out stamps were compelled to return with their detestable cargoes, or deliver them to the people to be destroyed. In Boston and many of the principal towns, the 1st of November was kept as a day of mourning and deep distress. All the shops were shut, the bells were tolled, muffled, and the effigies of the authors and abaters of the Stamp Act were carried in procession through the streets, and then torn to pieces, consumed by flames. The lawyers of the Supreme Court in New Jersey resolved that they would not purchase the stamps in their practice as a sacrifice to the public good. And the principal merchants in the colonies and great numbers of other classes of the inhabitants entered into solemn engagements not only to refuse to use the stamps, but also not to import any more goods from Great Britain until the Stamp Act should be repealed. Associations were formed called the Sons of Liberty, the object of which was to assist and protect with force if necessary, everyone who might be in danger from his resistance or opposition to the Stamp Act. This bold association originated in New York and prevailed throughout New England, and had not the act been repealed, must have led to civil war. And we're going to stop there at the top of 140. And I want to read, I'm looking for my bookmark. You can enjoy the picture show. And I'm going to read an article in the Bill of Rights from Epoch Times newspaper, which I am a subscriber, and I just subscribed to, I don't know if it's good because, my family says I read too much, but I just subscribed and paid $19.50 to the Valley News Dispatch, which is the Pittsuburgh Tribune, and I have read articles that are absolutely astounding over the past 30 years, and I want to get one out right now. I make scrapbooks, and I cut out all the articles that pertain to my interest, and so usually I read each article at least 3 times, and then I put in very artsy type format, I glue the articles into scrapbooks, and then I add designs and artwork, and I do a lot of decoupage. And I am a climate leader, but at the belief on the ecology, I am not this extremist